Today, we will use a scientific perspective to explore the complex truth behind meteorological events. According to the latest news from CNN, an earthquake measuring 7.4 on the Richter scale occurred in the Noto area of Ishikawa Prefecture, Japan, at 4:06 p.m. local time on January 1st. It was later raised to 7.6 on the magnitude scale. The earthquake was felt very strongly and the focal depth was all or shallow. The earthquake was also felt as far away as Tokyo. A video uploaded by a Disneyland visitor showed that after feeling the earthquake, the visitor immediately squatted on the ground to avoid danger. Passengers on the train were in the carriage and filmed the train shaking violently during the earthquake, and the electronic version of the ceiling on the train station platform shook to the point of falling apart. People went out to take shelter one after another, and some tourists who were skiing stayed in their cars or on the streets to avoid the disaster. After nightfall, a fire broke out in a row house in Wajima City, Ishikawa Prefecture. Although the area around the scene looked dark, flames and thick smoke could be seen coming out, and only orange flames could be seen in front of the eyes. Since Japan is currently in the dry season, it is still unclear whether the fire was caused by the recent earthquake. Firefighters may not be able to extinguish the fire immediately as there are reports of road breaks near the scene. Thank you for liking, leaving comments, subscribing and turning on the little bell. We will update every day. The authorities issued the highest level of tsunami warning, with tsunamis as high as 3 to 5 meters expected in Niigata, Toyama and Ishikawa prefectures, and called on people to evacuate. Videos posted by informants showed waves surging in the area, roads cracking, houses collapsing, and even fire alarms being triggered. Niigata, Toyama, Fukui, and Gifu prefectures also recorded earthquakes with a magnitude of 5, Osaka Prefecture with a magnitude of 4, and Tokyo with a magnitude of 3. Hokuriku Electric Power Company said 36,000 households were without power after the earthquake. The Tokaido Shinkansen announced that the sections from Tokyo to Odawara Station and Toyohashi to Shinkobi Station will be suspended until safety is confirmed. East Japan Railway Company also announced that the Tohoku Shinkansen, Jotsu Shinkansen, and Hokuriku Shinkansen have been suspended. There are many nuclear power plants in areas affected by the earthquake. Chief Cabinet Secretary Lin Fangjing held an emergency press conference at 5 p.m. to confirm that there are currently no abnormalities in the nuclear power plants. At around 4 o'clock this afternoon, the first wave of tsunami arrived in Noto, Ishikawa Prefecture, which issued a tsunami warning with an estimated height of 5 meters. A tsunami of 1 meter was measured at Noto Wajima Port in Ishikawa Prefecture, and a tsunami of 0.8 meters was measured in Toyama Prefecture. At the beginning of the new year, I wish the residents of the disaster-stricken areas in Japan are safe and can return to normal life as soon as possible. In recent times, earthquakes have occurred frequently in Asia. Our channel has tracked and reported multiple earthquakes in the Philippines from September to December. Among them, on December 2nd, a strong earthquake occurred in Mindanao, the second largest island in the Philippines. 5 people were in danger, 9 people were missing, and 529 families were affected. The U.S. Geological Survey measured the first magnitude 7.6 late Saturday, followed by 4 larger aftershocks exceeding magnitude 6.0. The Philippine Institute of Volcanology and Seismology measured the earthquake at magnitude 7.4 and recorded at least 600 aftershocks ranging in magnitude from 1.4 to 6.2. residents in coastal areas of Surigao del Sur and Davao Oriental were told to evacuate to higher ground after the first earthquake struck the east coast of Mindanao at around 22:37 local time. In several towns not far from the epicenter, people were seen rushing out of buildings and staying in open spaces. In Butuan City, patients were evacuated from hospitals. Some roads in the city in Surigao province developed cracks during the earthquake and aftershocks. A tsunami warning of 1 meter or more was issued, triggering evacuation orders for parts of the region and along Japan's southwestern coast. The U.S. tsunami warning system said waves up to 3 meters above tide could occur on parts of the Philippine coast. In June, July, September, and mid-November this year, multiple earthquakes of magnitude 6 or above occurred in the Philippines. Among them, on November 17th, a strong underwater earthquake occurred in the southern Philippines. A school, shopping mall, and dozens of houses were damaged, and many villages were without power. 2 major shopping malls in General Santos City, SM City, and Robinson's Palace were temporarily closed for inspection of their buildings. On September 12th, a strong earthquake of magnitude 6.2 suddenly occurred underground 120 kilometers southwest of Manila. Dozens of high-rise buildings sway leisurely, which is extremely thrilling. The ground cracked open with eye-catching wounds several meters long, many roads were impassable and bridges were in danger. This secret, underground monster instantly released huge energy. The straight glass curtain wall shattered, and office documents fell one after another. In the parking lot, countless vehicles collided and made a click-click sound. After the earthquake, the company's employees were depressed, production efficiency decreased, and the economic losses were incalculable. Not long after, a strong earthquake of magnitude 6.4 occurred in the southern coast, like a giant under the sea hammering the earth. The concrete frame of the house was instantly shattered, the roof was tilted, the walls were cracked, and the furniture was displaced. The doors of many houses were closed, and residents were trapped inside, anxiously waiting for rescue. The exterior walls of buildings of different colors peeled off, turning the buildings into mottled patients. Just as residents were cleaning their houses, another 5.2 magnitude earthquake hit, adding to the suffering of the battered Philippines. The Philippine government and ordinary people must face up to the potential earthquake risks in the country and make disaster prevention preparations to avoid greater disasters caused by future strong earthquakes. In recent years, the frequency of global earthquake events has been on the rise, and the reasons are complex. The first is plate movement. The surface of the Earth's crust is made up of multiple plates. The relative motion between these plates is constant. When the movement is blocked, energy accumulates. Once the static friction force inside the rock is exceeded, a breakthrough will occur, and the rock will fracture, causing earthquakes. This kind of earthquake, which is directly caused by plate movement, is the most common. For example, earthquakes in the Pacific Ring of Fire and seismic belt are mainly caused by the collision and subduction of the Pacific Plate, Philippine Plate, Indo-Australia Plate, etc. The second is active fault activity. There are many active faults distributed in the Earth's crust, and these faults are mobile and destructive. When the shear stress of the rocks on both sides of the fault exceeds its shear strength, the fault will move and cause an earthquake. What cannot be ignored is the impact of volcanoes and earthquakes. In areas near many volcanoes, due to magma movement, volcanic infiltration, and other reasons, there is a huge accumulation of energy underground. Once the rocks cannot bear it, they will rupture and volcanic earthquakes will occur. Such earthquakes often occur in volcanic craters or near volcanoes, such as volcanic earthquakes in Japan, Iceland, Indonesia, and other places. Of note are deep earthquakes caused by the subsidence of the isothermal surface at the roots of the Rocky Mountains. There are complex movements in the rock layers inside the Earth, and their negative buoyancy will cause the rocks to sink deeper into the mantle. When the rocks sink to a fault zone about 700 kilometers away, they will rupture due to high temperature and pressure, causing earthquakes. This type of earthquakes mostly occur in island arc subduction zones under the Pacific Ocean, such as deep source earthquakes in the Sunda Strait, Mariana Trench, Peru, Japan, and other places. What must be mentioned are various secondary earthquakes caused by tectonic movements. For example, after a major earthquake, a series of strong aftershocks are likely to occur in the main shock area and surrounding areas. The storage or drainage of large water bodies such as reservoirs may also induce weak earthquakes. Thermal mining, oil extraction, and other operating activities will also increase the number of near-surface earthquakes. The stress of rocks can induce weak earthquakes, etc. Although the scale of a single secondary earthquake is not large, its large number is also a seismic factor that cannot be ignored. What is easily overlooked are the various types of earthquakes induced by human activities. In recent years, it has been found that the number of earthquakes has increased significantly in places with frequent human activities, such as near dams and reservoirs, mining areas, oil extraction areas, and fluid injection areas. This is because human activities have changed the near-Earth stress field in these areas, reducing the shear strength of rocks and inducing some weak earthquakes and microseisms. Although the scale of human-induced earthquakes is limited, this method of causing earthquakes deserves attention. As a natural disaster, earthquake has a huge impact on the safety of life and property. Regarding the prediction of earthquake precursors, after long-term research and exploration, the scientific community has summarized the following possible precursors before earthquakes. First, there is abnormal crustal deformation. When the locally accumulated in situ stress exceeds the shear deformation resistance of the rock itself, permanent deformations such as bending and stretching of the crust will occur. This accumulated deformation is a precursor to earthquakes. Typical deformation abnormalities include surface uplift or subsidence, horizontal line deformation, etc. Secondly, there are abnormalities in groundwater levels and chemical composition. Due to stress and fault movement, the groundwater dynamic field will change before an earthquake, so the observation of abnormal rise and fall of water level, spring temperature, chemical composition, and other abnormalities are also regarded as earthquake precursors. More importantly, there are geomagnetic anomalies. When rocks are under stress, their magnetization and resistivity change. Therefore, by detecting changes in ground potential and electromagnetic fields, it can be determined whether the area is accumulating energy and there is a possibility of earthquakes. This is a warning sign of an earthquake. You cannot ignore the unusual behavior of the animals around you. In history, many animals, such as fish, insects, and mammals, experienced migration and disorder before earthquakes. This is mainly because they are more sensitive to tiny electromagnetic fluctuations, sound waves, and gas changes underground. In recent years, there have been many studies on animal abnormalities as earthquake precursors. Of note are geophysical anisotropy anomalies. In rocks, the propagation speed of rays is affected by the stress field. Therefore, by detecting abnormal changes in rock elastic wave velocity and its anisotropy, It can be determined whether the rock is accumulating energy and predicting the earthquake risk in the area. What is easily overlooked are satellite telemetry anomalies. Obtaining large-scale crustal deformation telemetry data through satellites, combined with historical earthquakes and stress distribution in seismically active areas, can determine the danger of local uplift and subsidence areas, which is also a new means of earthquake prediction. When an earthquake occurs, correct self-protection and escape are extremely critical. First, try to stay away from breakable objects such as windows. When an earthquake occurs, window glass is easily broken, so you should take shelter immediately to avoid being cut by the glass. At the same time, stay away from vases, bookcases, wall clocks, and other objects that are easy to fall. Secondly, hide under fixed objects such as tables and beds. This avoids head injuries and allows room for movement. You can also choose the door frame of the house, because the door frame is the mechanical node of the house and has strong earthquake resistance. In addition, be sure to open the door for evacuation as soon as possible. If there are no fixed objects in the room, you should open the door and leave as soon as possible and take refuge in the corridor or open space. But be careful when opening the door to prevent it from being pinched. When leaving, keep your head down, protect it with your hands, and move quickly. In particular, please note that the elevator must not be used. During an earthquake, elevators can easily malfunction and stop, and there is even a risk of electric shock or falling. You should immediately choose another exit to escape. It must be mentioned that we must pay attention to respond to fires after earthquakes at any time. Fires are likely to occur after an earthquake, so fire extinguishing equipment should be prepared at all times. Once a fire breaks out, ventilate and leave as soon as possible and call the police. During the escape process, never use the elevator. At the same time, use the evacuation stairs correctly. Many buildings have dedicated evacuation stairwells, which are the safest passages after an earthquake. When using, walk through the entire process quickly and in an orderly manner without pushing or crowding. It is worth noting that you should look for open ground to avoid danger. After leaving the room, find open ground to avoid falling objects from trees and tall buildings. Use the posture of lying down and then curling up to reduce the injured area, and use the head protecting posture to protect the head. The best ground is cement or grass. More importantly, after an earthquake, we must be alert to secondary disasters such as aftershocks, landslides, and building collapses. Report to the evacuation site as quickly as possible and seek help from professional departments. At the same time, pay attention to the contact and information transmission with family and friends. Making these preparations and responses will greatly increase the probability of successful escape in an earthquake disaster and save precious lives. Earthquake is an extremely destructive natural disaster. After an earthquake occurs, in addition to the damage caused by the main shock, it will also cause a variety of secondary disasters, including: first, after an earthquake occurs, a series of smaller and more frequent aftershocks than the main shock often occur in the epicenter and surrounding areas. The number of aftershocks is large and the time span is large, which may induce secondary collapse of buildings and secondary collapse of mountains. Secondly, earthquakes will destroy the internal structure of mountain rocks, greatly reducing the overall stability of the mountain, thereby triggering large-area plastic flow in the mountain. In particular, steep slopes in canyons and snow-covered mountains are more prone to large-scale landslides, debris flows, and other disasters. In addition, vibration will increase the pore water pressure in saturated sandy soil, causing the soil structure to be scattered and liquefied. Surface subsidence, soil flow, pipeline deformation, etc. can all lead to serious disasters. What cannot be ignored is that earthquakes will damage the sealing of gas pipelines, oil tanks, and other facilities, and will also damage traditional stoves, electrical appliances, etc., causing secondary fires. Fires can spread quickly, causing loss of life and property. More importantly, it is to prevent the damage of tsunamis. The movement of faults caused by earthquakes may produce vertical displacements in the ocean, form water level abnormalities at the boundaries, and propagate at extremely high speeds, triggering devastating tsunamis. It is worth mentioning the prevention of epidemic diseases after disasters. Earthquake damage will paralyze the electricity, water, and sewage treatment systems, and at the same time gather a large number of injuries, which can easily induce the epidemic of infectious diseases and skin diseases. More importantly, attention is paid to the impact on the ecological environment. Earthquakes kill a large number of organisms and destroy the living environment of animals and plants. At the same time, soil erosion and mudslides will damage the ecosystem and require decades or even longer recovery time. These secondary disasters, together with the main shock disaster, they constitute the comprehensive disaster effect of the earthquake. In order to reduce the impact of secondary disasters, it is necessary to pay attention to prevention and improve the ability of engineering structures to resist earthquakes, fires, and liquefaction. Preventing and mitigating earthquake disasters is a major issue facing the world. After long-term practice, countries have accumulated many valuable experiences in earthquake prevention and disaster reduction that are worth learning from each other. First, we need to strengthen earthquake monitoring and early warning. More and more countries have established dense seismic station networks in earthquake-prone areas, as well as advanced submarine seismic stations and satellite monitoring systems to achieve accurate detection of underground anomalies and provide support for earthquake early warning and forecasting. For example, Japan built the world's highest density seismic observation network in the 1990s, and there are also submarine seismic stations on the west coast of the United States. This plays an important role in mitigating earthquake losses. At the same time, legislation on earthquake-resistant buildings must be strengthened. For example, the West Coast region of the United States strictly implements earthquake-resistant building codes, and Japan has also promulgated new earthquake-resistant design codes and regulations. The implementation of these systems has significantly improved the earthquake-resistant level of buildings. What must be mentioned is the need to carry out publicity and education. Many countries around the world have carried out continuous earthquake disaster prevention science propaganda, escape and avoidance training, emergency drills, and other activities, which have comprehensively improved the earthquake disaster prevention awareness and self-rescue and mutual rescue capabilities of all sectors of society. The practice of these measures shows that preventing and controlling earthquake disasters requires the full cooperation of the government, scientific and technological workers, and the public. Only by taking multiple measures simultaneously can we build a solid defense line to reduce earthquake disaster losses. It is hoped that mankind will make greater progress in this endeavor. Thank you for liking, leaving a message, subscribing, and turning on the little bell. We will update the latest news from around the world every day. Continue to use a scientific perspective to explore the complex truth behind meteorological events.